Hey, what's up, speedtards? Today we're going to be conducting an interview with Crux, formerly known as Scythe. Regular listeners have heard him before on the recent Leon Trotsky on Futurism episode, as well as the Mayakovsky special we did back in like January or February. So longtime listeners have heard Crux on here before. Crux has started a new compute organization called the New Generation, and we're going to be learning about his new organization, what they believe in, what they stand for, the kind of actions they plan on doing. So hopefully a good live audience kind of picks up and we can get some questions going. But welcome back to FF, Crux. How's it going, man?
I'm pretty good. I should clarify, New Generation isn't an organization as much as it is an organizational committee, I guess, a committee to organize,
Okay,
if that makes
so it's
sense.
like a network of like futurists, kind of, or
Yeah,
compute specifically.
yeah,
Okay, so first, I guess first of all, for those who are not, is communist futurism, and how does it differ from Italian futurism or Marinettian futurism?
so compute descends from Mayakovsky's role within, I believe, I think Moscow Soviet. It was one of the lesser known Soviets, unlike the Petrograd Soviet, that focused on the belief that futurism was the only true form of proletarian culture that could exist to promote communism. Uh, and it originally their tenets were just follow the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and mix it with stuff with Marinetti. The way it differs from Marinetti is it is a nationalist. It isn't pro-patriot. They do take a pretty quote unquote patriotic take on the Soviet Union where they view it as above the other capitalist countries, but they weren't like, oh, it's inherently superior because it's Russian or because it's Ukrainian or because it's Georgian, but rather because the standard of living within the USSR was higher than, say, in the US. Uh,
Okay, um, so just like the nationalism question is like the main difference. Like ideologically,
yeah,
they're communists. Marinetti ended up allying with the fascists. So like that right off the bat is like a clear ideological distinction between communist futurism and Italian futurism. So yeah, you guys go off of Mayakovsky more so than Marinetti. As far as new generation goes, like, would you be willing to work with more like Italian style futurists, or like, is there wiggle room as far as ideology goes, or are you dead set on like communism plus futurism? Like, if a third positionist or something who's interested in futurism wanted to join new generation, how would that fly? Like,
they couldn't be like promotive of fascism. If they were interested in learning what compute was all about, then I'd be willing to let them come in and discuss. But if it's like they come in and start talking about how the Bolshevik Revolution was funded by Jewish bankers in Great Britain, then I probably would kick them out simply for just being disruptive.
yeah, for being anti-communist, it's not really what you're about, which is fair enough. I mean, there are like, I don't know, Wignat futurist groups like American Futurist. I don't really condone in them or promote them. I don't think they're real futurists. I think they're mostly like Wignats, and they think the aesthetic goes hard, but I don't think they're really like committed to a futurist worldview at all. I think they kind of contradict each other in a lot of ways. Um, So like futurism should be revolutionary, and I think compute is revolutionary. I don't necessarily consider like National Socialism revolutionary personally, but I think we're in agreement on that one. So no third position futurists unless they're there genuinely to learn and they're open-minded and they're respectful, which is fair enough, I would say. But yeah, so like what kind of things do you plan on doing as like new generation? Do you have any like plans or actions? You also do Promethean magazine, and yeah, your first issue is out. So do you want to talk about Promethean a bit and like what your plans for new generation are, how it's different from Promethean as far as goals?
Promethean's just a magazine, not even really a magazine. Really, I'm just planning on using it as a forum to publish essays and stuff from what I write and from what whoever wants to be published on there writes. New generation, I'm planning on doing a design for that, along with posters and stickers and shit like that. Not really. Right now, it's just for getting the word out. Uh, Not really an organization where we
Yeah, getting
take
the
up.
ball rolling.
Yeah. Uh, as for Promethean, I'm more or less just
Okay,
using it as,
you published two articles. Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
two articles. It's okay. Two articles on Futurism Forever and
Yeah,
Promethean. Promethean one was more for people who already were oriented in communism, while the FF one was more for people who were more into futurism.
man, you're breaking up a bit, and your sound is really muffled. Maybe we should try and sort this out better because it's starting to break up too. So,
Yeah,
are you still there?
yeah, I'm still here. Let me get my stuff up.
All right, sorry about the sound quality, guys. We're trying our best here. Like I'm aware it's not the best. You can still hear Crux, but like if it could be a little better, it would be better. But sorry for the technical difficulties. Bear with us. Do do do. Um, Crux.
But how's it sounding now?
It sounds about the same. As long as it stops breaking up, like it'll suffice. You know. So yeah, the two articles you wrote. Let's start with the potential futurism you published on Promethean. That was written more for people who are already kind of red pilled on communist futurism. They already know what it means. And we need an organization on futurism forever was more intended for people who are not necessarily confutes yet, but are like curious about learning more. So let's start with potential futurism. You do kind of lay out in that article uh, how communist futurism, or like what communist futurism in the 21st century should be, how it should be different from the Italian movement. Do you want to talk about that a little bit or summarize the article briefly?
So potential futurism was more for how futurism and communism go together in the context of the 21st century. There's not really much to it. It's really short, and I'm pretty much just describing how futurism is only possible through communism and how communism can only be realized through a futurist cultural movement. The We Need an Organization was written more for people to realize how important it is to have an organization in order to get stuff done, rather than just being random posters on the internet, rather than being solely confined to the internet. It's important to focus on IRL stuff and stuff as a unit rather than as an individual.
Yeah. Well, like you can only go so far on the internet. It's good for like getting your message out there, for networking, for promoting yourself, but a lot of these movements never take like the second step and start doing things in real life. We see it on both the left and the right. Like a lot of people get comfy with their internet persona and just stay online. They don't even try and do anything in real life. So you guys definitely interested in working towards in real life action, promoting futurism and a futurist worldview, um, communist future worldview. Yeah, what kind of actions would you guys like be interested in? Um,
Uh,
is that too
Postering,
specific or postering
yeah,
and
postering and IRL action. It's right now. It would be small scale, like putting up stickers, putting up posters. We're not going to be burning down like houses in an artistic way. You know what I mean? We're not going to be
yeah,
doing that.
um,
Action like we're a massive organization. It's really just me. Our Telegram channel is about 33 people now. So at this point, it really is just doing small scale, putting up posters and flyers with links to stuff.
yeah. Anyone who's on Telegram who's listening, like if this sounds like something you're interested in, I did put the link to Crux's Telegram channel in the video description, so you can find his channel there. He does have a public chat you can join if you want to talk to about communism or futurism or have further questions. The live audience thing doesn't really seem to be happening just yet. It's kind of an odd time to be streaming. It's like noon where I'm at. It's earlier throughout. Hopefully, we can get some people in here to ask some questions. But yeah, the link is in the video description, so you can find him there. And yeah, it's not just the live audience either. People will watch after we're done streaming too. It'd be nice to have, but we'll see what happens. Yeah. So let's talk about the second article a little bit. Let me scroll up here. So yeah, we need an organization that I published on Futurism Forever blog about a month ago now. So yeah, do you want to talk about that article a bit? I guess you're like the title kind of speaks for itself. We need an organization, but do you want to comment on that article a little bit?
Yeah. So when I wrote them, I kind of wrote them to be similar to where you can read both and still take away the same message. Um, we need an organization was written to be more of a call to action rather than a well, both are written to be a call to action. Uh, but we need an organization more oriented towards future, which is what most of your audience is futurist. So they aren't different to where it's like, oh hey, I read this and it's completely different than what was posted on Promethean. They're both advocating for a communist futurist organization. They're both uh, calling for a push towards more IRL activity rather than online activity.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, when you're starting out, it's mostly about getting the word out there, building your internal structure up a little bit, recruiting people, finding the right kind of people who are, you're ideologically aligned with, given that it is like in a real life group or you're trying to get to that point, like, yeah, like with Futurism Forever, like I will have conservatives on, I'll have communists, anarchists. Like I am interested in talking to people from across the political spectrum on futurism forever. Have to be futurists. So I think a lot of like our audience are just kind of people who are curious about it. They don't necessarily have a futurist worldview yet. We kind of act as like the introduction. People who like really fuck with futurism though, like yeah, new generation is where you want to be, because they're actually going to be doing in real life stuff. FF is mostly just about getting the word out there, talking to different people, trying to, you know, act as an intro to futurism for people, so they can learn what it is, how it could or should be applied in the 21st century. I think we both agree we're not really interested in just reviving the original movement. It acts as the foundation. It inspires us both, but we are true. Like the future important things to people. We're not necessarily obsessed with cars or airplanes like Marinetti. So yeah, it's like a new 21st century future that we want to advocate for. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, yeah. I think the first line in potential futurism was me talking about how since futurism has kind of diluted and became so more focused on aesthetic rather than action, that futurism now has the ability to become something new that a lot of things can't stay the same for, like communism. There's so much within communism as like still a living, breathing movement to where you can't just be like, okay, we're now just going to change the definition and I'm going to focus more on this that wasn't there in the original manifesto. Uh, like, for example, Marinetti's talking about cars a lot, which makes sense because in 1909, when he wrote the Futurist Manifesto, cars were still really, really, really new. They were still this like spectacle that allowed for speed and stuff like that, even though the cars that they were driving only went like 20 miles per hour. Now, since cars are so common and so take up such an aspect of our lives, that we should focus more on coming up with the next best thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Rather than
cars
focus.
don't really imply like speed to me anymore. When I think about cars and car culture, I think about, being stuck in bumper to bumper traffic. Doesn't necessarily imply speed, like Marinetti thought it would. I think of gridlock when I think of cars now. Like the future should be about like bullet trains and, things that can actually get us from point A to point B faster than they do now. Cars are like a symbol of the present. Now it's such like an integrated part in our culture. But we are futurists. We want to like move beyond the present and the here and now. And yeah, we fuck with bullet trains and shit. And walkable cities. It's kind of like I don't know. It's kind of like a controversial stance of mine, I guess. People don't really get mad about it. Maybe not controversial is the right word, but like yeah, I am like a walkable cities guy. More bike lanes, better public transit, bullet trains, stuff like that. More so than cars and like the personal automobile, which I think has kind of become a symbol of the past almost, where it's just the present. Um, you've got to move past that. It's the whole point of being futurist. Would you agree with that, or like, what's your stance on walkable cities and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think we should advocate for better like city planning. I live in the middle of Kansas, and our city planning is so fucking bad that like there's streets that have a sidewalk, and then like across that street there's like no sidewalk for like 2 miles.
Yeah,
There's areas that are like so under planned that it, you're there and you're like, okay, so who the hell planned this? Uh, I think like there's bike lanes in certain streets, but then like the next street there's no bike lane, so you're like no way of cars to be able to like know whether or not you're allowed on there. Legally, all bikes are allowed on there, but like bike lanes are there to show that if you go across this, you can be fined, and you're not supposed to be crossing that boundary. Uh, but I do fuck with walkable cities. It's just how we apply them to everywhere else besides metropolitan areas like New York and Portland. Like where I live in Kansas,
Yeah.
there's not a lot of population density. So how do we make a area that's so widespread walkable? You know, and it really just comes down to city planning.
Yeah, definitely would have to be applied. Yeah, applied in a way that makes sense on what the need is. If you're in a rural area, you kind of need cars to get around. Um, we're not negating that, but I don't think you really need cars in the city. Like a lot of people do just, take the bus or take a walk, things are less spread out, and people like everything's slower, ties everything up. It can be frustrating dealing with drivers. It's a different reality in like the countryside though, for sure. Um, Ideally, like yeah, I would like to get to the point where like the only people on the roads are like truck drivers and public transit though. That should be like the goal. Um, Less gridlock, and more speed. Um, Yeah, yeah. So there's like 4 people watching now. Anyone, if anyone in the audience has any questions, like don't be shy. I don't have a lot of questions prepared, so we're kind of going to see how this goes. Um,
Yeah, and if we
yeah.
have to do another, perfectly fine. I like at the hello 3D person. Uh, if like no
Yeah.
one really comes, anything like that, then we can just do it another time. I
Yeah.
just got a new mic that we could work on. So
Yeah. Okay. The sound isn't going to be like terrific on this video or anything. I do think it will like hurt views, in all honesty, but it suffices. Like I can hear you and all that. Says yeah, I was like kind of hoping for audience participation. What's up, CSD? It's good to see you listening. Yeah, CSD, do you have any questions about communist futurism? Ask in the chat. And yeah, I want this to go for like an hour, so we'll just kind of go with the flow and see what happens. We can talk about other things too. I guess it's like let's start with Elon Musk and Twitter. Crime Thing got banned earlier this week, basically just because Andy and Go told Elon Musk to do so. What do you think about uh, Elon Musk turning Twitter into a free speech platform, quote unquote? I'm working on an article for the blog about right-wing cancel culture, by the way. They have the right has a rich tradition of censorship and canceling culture. They're no different from the left, really. They have a different criteria of what acceptable speech is and what isn't acceptable, but it's not really like free speech absolutism. There are a lot of like left-wing groups and accounts that are getting banned right now. So Crime Thing is like one of the bigger examples. But yeah, do you want to comment on Twitter censorship and Elon Musk and all that? It's been kind of a hot topic over the past couple weeks.
yeah, I support any kind of thing that makes Twitter obsolete. That makes Twitter burn to the fucking ground. You know. Uh, But it is ironic how Musk came in and was like, "Oh, free speech is now legal on Twitter. Comedy is legal on Twitter again." When what Kanye is doing is honestly the funniest thing I've ever seen in my entire goddamn life. It's so. I did you watch the interview with Alex Jones?
I saw clips of it of Kanye. Well, he's also playing free speech card, and all
Yeah,
all these people tell people the N word on social media and deny the Holocaust and shit. Like, you know,
yeah.
that's what like free
It,
speech platforms turn into. Um, like you
well,
can go to Gab and see a free spot where like most normal people don't want to hang out around that place because you feel dirty like quickly. Most people don't want to be called the ends. They believe like the Holocaust happened or some shit. Like I don't know. I kind of think like that's what free speech platforms inevitably become. It's the same on like BitChute and shit like that. I kind of think like the better when there is like rules and
yeah,
code of conduct and shit. Like there are
I
platforms like Gab if you like you have to use racial slurs, but most of us don't want to hang around such parts.
yeah, I consider myself pretty pro free speech. I like with Twitter being quote unquote free speech isn't free speech. It's just speech without consequence. It's where, oh, I can call someone the N word, but if they come and beat my ass, then they're the ones in the wrong. I believe in speech with consequence. So if you're like running your fucking mouth, then there should be consequences for that. But I'm also like they shouldn't
Yeah.
be arrested, and you know what I mean. Which it wasn't even
Well, people,
happening on Twitter.
yeah, people get really comfortable running their mouths off anonymously behind like an anime girl profile picture, and like they never deal with any consequences as a result because it's the internet and it's everyone's anonymous. In real life, if you said that same shit, there would be consequences. You'd probably get swung on talking that way. You know, Free speech, you're allowed to say it, but how people are going to react to it is another question. Online, they never
Yeah.
get like face the consequences though, unless like someone is kicking them.
Well, there's
In
also
my
the
like personal, like, because I was on Gab for a couple years, and like I ended up liking Twitter a lot more because it's much more diverse. It's less of like a there's much more diversity in opinion. You can find different groups of people and like your niche interests. Gab is like only Q-tards and neo Nazis pretty much, and like yeah, and like most like normal people don't really want to be running in those circles, so they kind of distance themselves or just leave that platform. You know, like the only thing that makes Twitter tolerable to me is like people saying really like atrocious things do eventually get kicked. People who want to praise mass shooters and shit. Like this week they kicked Crime Thing, but they also let like Brett Stevens back on. And I forget his name, but like yeah, they are letting like literal Nazis back on the platform while kicking left wing accounts just because Andy Ngo asks Elon Musk to. I think it is a problem. It is definitely a slippery slope they're going down. Switching from like a left wing bias to a right wing bias. It's not really free speech. I mean, it's going to be the kind of speech that right wingers approve of. I think. I don't think it's going to kill Twitter. Like banning far right accounts did kill Twitter. They just went to another. Those accounts just went like operate within the code of conduct of Twitter. They just found free speech terms they wanted to say. I think it'll be the same with like the far left kind of getting pushed off the platform. A lot of more centrist types will still be able to exist there, but yeah.
I don't know. I don't really
Let's ask
about it, but
CSD. Um, is communist fusion related to theism? And what is Confuse Nick Land? Communist futurist, would you say?
I consider Bolshevik-Leninism and not even Trotskyism. I consider Trotskyism and Bolshevik-Leninism to be two separate entities. I do think Bolshevik-Leninism is closely tied to communist futurism. A lot of people within the USSR that were futurists sided with Trotsky during the power struggle, uh, and a lot of them did take pro-permanent revolution positions in relation to revolutions in colonized and underdeveloped countries. Uh, as for Nickland,
And,
I haven't really looked. Was that a good enough? Was that a good enough answer? I should say Trotskyism, as it is today, like with the IMT or any other Trotskyist org, I don't really see as being futurist like the Bolshevik Leninists were. I wrote a good essay on the difference between Bolshevik Leninism and Trotskyism, which is on Promethean Magazine. I recommend checking it out. Uh, but as for Nick Land, I haven't really read into him. The stuff I have read, I thought is interesting. I do find his takes on alienation to be good, but like with most things, if you go in as a futurist and read Nick Land and you find a way to where you're able to mesh the two together, then all power to you. I won't say they are contradictory, or if you read one, you can't be the other. You know, uh, if that makes sense.
yeah, I think like Landian accelerationism and futurism do kind of complement each other. Land would definitely go in like different directions from Marinetti. They actually both kind of became more reactionary in their later years, and more right wing. Land's early shit is kind of post Marxist, I would say. Like it's directly informed like the original accelerationist in a lot of ways. Like he did think capitalism was going to uh, reach a critical point where it won't be able to continue as capitalism and will evolve into something else. Land's whole thing is the only way through the only way out of capitalism is through it. So he wants to accelerate the trends so that capitalism can evolve into something else. And yeah, I think it complements futurism. It doesn't really work against it. He does definitely go in different directions than Marinetti would have, but he's writing like 75 years later or something. So the world had changed by the 90s when he wrote like the stuff in Fang Numina. I haven't read his Dark Enlightenment or later more right wing stuff myself. So I'm mostly informed by his like earlier views. But but yeah, and like yeah, we did an episode on Trotsky recently, about a month ago now actually. But he like Trotsky was very critical of futurism in that article in a lot of ways. Um, he kind of gives it props at times too. He clearly did his research. I wouldn't say he's necessarily pro. I think more in favor of it than say Joseph Stalin or something. But I wouldn't say
Yeah,
he himself is a futurist. But yeah, you could definitely be sympathetic to Trotsky's point of view within much context. I think that they're necessarily at odds with each other. Um, just Trotsky, I consider a futurist.
yeah. I
My
when
Mecca Gale, go ahead.
uh since we were on the topic of accelerationism, I should say that my personal belief is we shouldn't resort to accelerationism of like we need to accelerate the process to where the proletariat will rise up. I think those conditions are already there. We just need to be able to put it and direct it into an outlet that is revolutionary. Not like the because my understanding of accelerationism is more towards artificially creating the conditions to which the proletariat will have no other choice other than to fight. I don't think that's true. But like I said, I'm not really familiar with Nick Land's work. I'm interested in getting into it. I just really haven't had the time.
Okay. Yeah. I've only read his like earlier stuff myself. The stuff in Fang Numina and his book on George Bataille, The Thirst for Annihilation. Those are the two I've read. Um, and yeah, like I follow him on Twitter, but like I'm less familiar with his later stuff. He definitely does have a lot of like right wing takes on Twitter. And yeah, like Marinetti, he kind of became a lot more reactionary in his later years. So I would say like his later stuff probably is not um, compatible with communist futurism. I think you could have like some nuanced views on his earlier stuff. It's not the same thing as futurism, but yeah, like I said, I think they kind of complement each other nicely. Um, yeah, Mecca Gale is saying there are still rules on Gab and BitChute. They just aren't owned by the likes of Bill Gates, which, you know, is true. They aren't owned by like billionaires, which, you know, and there are rules, but it's like you're not allowed to post or say anything illegal on those platforms. So, like, if you're doxing people or, you know, you're threatening to kill someone or something, like, yeah, they will do something about that. You're not allowed to break the law on like, but like as far as racial slurs aren't going to get you banned, you know, peddling Jewish conspiracies aren't going to get you banned, denying the Holocaust isn't going to get you banned. The stuff, the kind of stuff that like will get you kicked off Twitter or used to. I think like those people still get kicked from Twitter, like when they're running their mouse off though. Like it's not going to be free speech absolutism for the right either, but I do definitely see it like moving in a more right wing sympathetic direction, whereas before it was fairly woke and you know, under like the old management, crime think never had any strikes, and then new management and people are getting kicked who before didn't really have problems on that platform. So a lot of like far left groups, I think, are going to be targeted by that, and you know, it's possible we'll start seeing a lot less of them on Twitter, and they'll pop up on other platforms that are more sympathetic to them. Um, I guess like the thing is like I think social media is kind of like toxic, and I wish I had to spend less time on it than I do. But it's like when you're running a project or a group like Futurism Forever, it is like good for like promoting yourself for networking. Like I find cool people like on the podcast on Twitter and shit. Like I do kind of have to be on social media while I'm doing FF. If I wasn't doing FF, I'd probably have no interest in Twitter in all honesty. But how about more broadly, like social media? Do you think it's a positive thing or a negative thing? You said earlier you support anything that putting to the ground. You know, I wouldn't be seeing employ that. Do you want to elaborate on that at all? Because it is an important part of like modernity and like kind of what our culture is now, how we communicate. Like, what would the computational media be?
I support social media and like connecting with people. I find Twitter to be a hellscape that allows for the creation of things that shouldn't exist. You know what I mean? Like almost every fucking day, there's some dumbass discussion. There's always something going around that's obviously not true that people take seriously. It's just a feedback loop of misinformation that just keeps people in the state of decay. You know, there is no real connections that are long term enough to where they are viable that can be on Twitter. You can network easily on there, but it's only good in the short term because of how fast stuff moves on Twitter. So it's what I'd like to call a blitzkrieg networking campaign where you meet a bunch of people, you get the word out, you use those people to get the word out, and hopefully by the time they lose interest and move on to their next thing, they are you're successful in what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like you always have to be prepared to like get kicked tomorrow or something. Like, definitely don't get too comfortable on Twitter. You should be branching out in like other networks too, so you're not too dependent on like this one social media platform because it could be here today, gone tomorrow for you. So that's always been a problem. I think the right are like more used to getting kicked from the platform, and like third positionists and stuff, where the left got kind of comfy. So like when they're getting kicked, all of a sudden it seems like the end of the world. Yeah, I mean, there are positives and negatives to it. I think, like, I am against free speech absolutism. I think, there is um, speech that is appropriate and inappropriate for the situation. Twitter is like kind of a mainstream platform. So, like, obviously, racial slurs are not allowed. Saying things that are very bigoted are probably going to get you kicked. Like, even back in my third positionist days, I never really had a problem with getting kicked because I don't really use racial slurs. Like, you can be a fascist or a communist or have like controversial views on Twitter. It's like usually if you're saying things that are most people consider to be repugnant, yeah, that's going to get you kicked because it's a mainstream platform. Like, act accordingly.
Yeah,
Don't talk like you're like in the, yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that. I'm just kind of talking. Uh, CSD has a couple more questions. What is your guys' take on Mark Fisher, and what is the Compute stance on the Russian-Ukraine war? We talked about Mark Fisher a bit on the last podcast, on tourism. I'm pretty sure I'm the one who brought him up. Um, yeah, I mean, I like Mark Fisher. I've read Capitalism. I think it is a good read. And I want to cover it on the podcast in some extent at some point. It's been on the list for time, but we haven't gotten to it yet. Um, yeah, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. People are kind of disillusioned with the future, which is kind of what I promote futurism. We need to get excited about the future again and like have a new vision where we go years from now, you know? But yeah, people don't really believe in the future anymore. It's really a challenge that we have to deal with and confront and overcome. Yeah, get people excited about the future again. I think he is worth reading. I haven't read him extensively, but Capitalist Realism was, I agree with a lot of it, and I would recommend it. How about you, Crux?
yeah. I find Mark Fisher to be pretty good. His capitalist realism is really good. I just kind of think a lot of what Mark Fisher talks about has already been talked about by the Situationist International, specifically their Society of the Spectacle. I like if you want to read him, Mark Fisher, then that's cool. I just don't really see him as a integral part to the development of communism and futurism. You know. As for the stance on the Russian-Ukraine war, I take the
Yeah,
stance.
you're recommending you're you're breaking up a little bit. For those who missed it, he was saying like read Society of the Spectacle by Guy Debord. He likes Mark Fisher, but he thinks Guy Debord covers these topics and themes, wrote about them better. So
Yeah,
I've only seen like the movie version of Society of the Spectacle. I've never like read it cover to cover. I need to get on that. But the movie version is pretty good. I mean, I kind of like know the gist of it. Um, yeah, read Guide to Board. I would also recommend Raoul Vanagum, The Revolution of Everyday Life. That one I am more familiar with than Society of the Spectacle. I think it covers a lot of the same territory, though. Um, I'd say Vanagum is less theoretical; it's more approachable. Personally, it's my like personal take. But yeah, how about the Russian-Ukraine war? Do you have strong
Yeah,
opinions on that?
yeah, I don't take the position that Ukraine is good or that Russia's good. I think right now, Russia is waging is an imperialist war. They're invading a sovereign country that doesn't have any wish to be a part of Russia's federation. So I side with the Ukrainian people against the Russian government's imperialist actions, while also pointing out the fact that Ukraine's government is very anti-communist. It's very anti-worker. Their motives for defending Ukraine is almost entirely self-serving for the Ukrainian bourgeoisie, not for the Ukrainian people. While I also find Russia's invasion of Ukraine to also be self-serving because it's not there to increase the standard of living for the working Russians, but more for the Russian bourgeoisie who are just trying to gain a monopoly of resources within the region. I find it weird how no one points this out, but Russia is still on the decline. It's still Their still standard of living is still incredibly small. Their life expectancy age, I think, is still very low for an industrialized country. Uh, they still have a very high child prostitute rate. So I don't know if their invasion of Ukraine is there to be a sort of to regain prestige in the face of all of these problems that they have within their borders, or whether or not it is exclusively to be gaining a monopoly on raw resources in the region. But I'm not a pro Russia quote unquote
Yeah,
Marxist. Russia is a progressive force because Ukraine nationalized Azov. When you also have Russia having in the same
yeah,
fucking photo, guys wearing SS patches on his uniform, shaking hands with quote unquote anti-fascists within the Russian army. So the whole denazification justification that the Russians are pushing is inherently false, and it's really funny when you remember the fact
yeah.
that Putin was originally
From where I'm
saying that.
sitting, like, Crux, you're
Sorry.
breaking up. It's not your fault. But yeah, like I would agree with what you said. Like Russia has a lot of internal like social problems right now. Should they really be like trying to build empire right now, or you know, be aggressors? I don't know. I don't really take the pro-Ukraine stance either, though, because I'm opposed to NATO. I'm opposed to the EU. Russia is kind of a power who can like flex some muscle against those organizations. So I don't really take a strong stance on it either side. I live in Canada. It doesn't like directly affect me. We're not a politics channel. We're more of a art channel. I love Russian art. There are lots of good Russian artists, lots of good Russian futurists, also a lot of good Ukrainian futurists. So I'm sympathetic to people on both sides. I think it's an unfortunate state of affairs. If I was like really pushed who I side with, I'd probably side with Russia. But yeah, I think what you said is very valid though. Like they have a really like low life expectancy. Social conditions are not the best in Russia. I do kind of think they should be working to improve things internally and not be looking to expand elsewhere right now. But yeah, CSD left another comment. Yes, the idea. Oh shit. Yeah, the idea that the war is fought between Nazi and communists is ridiculous when there are both Nazis and communists on both sides of the conflict. Yeah, that's definitely true. Azov Battalion are just like fucking weird to me though. It's like you guys are fucking Nazis who support the EU, who support NATO. You're fighting for things like, ultimately, you're fighting for things like gay rights and stuff like that. It's kind of a contradiction of your worldview. Um, or maybe it isn't. Maybe that's what Nazism has always been about. I don't know. I'm kind of just talking shit at this point. But yeah, any thoughts on CSD's comment?
Yeah, I don't think they're fighting for NATO. I think Azov is just fighting for the independence of Ukraine, which, like, as ultra nationalists, makes sense. They probably think that this is a the expansion of gay rights within Ukraine is just a short-term thing, and that they will continue to be allowed to commit hate crimes against the LGBTQ community within Ukraine. They already have been. I think since the war started, they've used, like, we need to crack down on pro-Russian elements by beating up this gay couple outside of I don't know what the fuck they have in Ukraine. Uh, but I don't think any of this is based out of long term commitment, but more out of short term gain. There's no
Yeah.
real loyalty in this song.
Yeah. I like, I'm not necessarily saying like I'm against LGBT and I support Russia for that reason. I kind of disagree with like Putin's stance on that, and like the ultra conservatism that exists in Russia. Like I'm not a conservative. It just gets kind of like contradictory for like a lot of the things like Azov claimed to be about, like fighting for. You know, I don't like hypocrisy or, you know, I like consistent. And, Azov Battalion definitely knows who's buttering their bread and, where their supports come. They kind of fall in line with that. But yeah, I'm not a geopolitics guy. There are people who know a lot more about the situation than I do. I kind of just form based on things I pick up here. So yeah, any like final thoughts on Ukraine Russia conflict from Crux?
Not that really comes to mind. No.
Yeah, I think we've kind of covered that. We might start wrapping up. We've been going for almost an hour. So, like, I will say, last chance to the people watching. If you have any questions, but yeah, I'm gonna say we're gonna wrap it up. Thanks for listening, guys. Follow
Yeah,
Crux's channel, The New Generation, on Telegram. The link is in the description. And yeah, Crux, any final thoughts you want to get out there before we wrap up?
yeah. I would. I like to say I'd like to do something like this again, where there's more like opportunity for people to come in and my mic isn't shit. Uh, and at like a time that isn't, cause it's like 11 here, and I know it's probably still pretty early for some people, to where we could do it on like
Yeah,
a night
yeah.
time and have
Well,
like a
I'm
discussion.
sure like when we're doing FF on YouTube more regularly, like there will be other opportunities for you to talk about your group. This is really like the intro, get the ball rolling. But yeah, hopefully it was informative for people and they're motivated to check out Crux's Telegram channel and get involved.
Yeah, We love to have you. And I'd also like to say that right now, the main channel you can't contribute to, but there is a inner channel that I recommend joining to have like discussions and talk about stuff and like get specific about, you know.
Okay, so that's it. Thanks for listening. Salute.
See ya.